Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Schaberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are happy to be here today with Tenika Combs on Got Advocacy. She's going to talk to us about when we might need a special education advocate. She's got a lot of information that she's going to share with us today. And so, as you guys know, as always, I like to share our little housekeeping tips from the beginning. So first things first, we're in webinar mode today, so we can't see you or hear you, but we do know you're out there. We always invite you to put your questions in the chat box. We want you to put your questions out there because if you have one, somebody else probably does as well, and it'll be helping others as well. So I am going to be monitoring the chat box today for Tenika, and we'll be popping in with questions today. And so, as always, I always just like to give a brief overview. Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We do a lot of advocacy for families in the special needs community, and we help people plan for lifetime care, future care. We do a lot of advisory and consulting. We have 30 plus years of experience, and we always just like to say that your situation is specialized. When we're planning for a loved one with a disability, the situation is specialized, and we do suggest that you work with a specialist. Of the financial advisors out there, there's about 260,000 financial advisors in the U.S., and about 125 total are nuanced and special needs. And this is really important to you and your loved ones for maintaining eligibility for state and federally funded programs such as Medicaid waivers, SSI, Medicaid. Those are just to name a few of them. A lot of our families don't qualify for programs like this. Maybe your child is a minor, they're under 18 and they haven't qualified for these things. Everything changes when they turn 18. So what may have not mattered for 18 years really starts mattering when we're transitioning into adulthood and we're hitting that 18-year mark. So having said that, I would just like to say, Tenika, we are really happy to have you here with us today. Tell us a little bit about you and a little bit more about your organization and what you do.
Thank you guys so much for partnering with me and allowing me to partner with you and present this information. I am Tenika Combs. I am the founder. I'm a special education advocate. I founded the agency over 10 years ago, but moreover, I am a parent first. So I walk parents along the journey that I personally have walked with an area of expertise in transitional support. My agency is a provider through Texas Workforce Commission. So we're there to take you from that beginning stage when you're learning how to advocate for your child and making sure they have the rights in the school system. We're diving into to help you develop a plan to get connected with some of these resources, because what you all offer is very important to the transition of our families. So it's very important that I walk parents along this journey and making sure that they're equipped at the end of the day. A little bit about my background. I have a specialty. I'm a specialized advocate. So when you work with an agency like Got Advocacy, you get all of the things that come with a very wide array of expertise. So I have a background in case management, especially with those Medicaid waiver programs. So I understand how to access a lot of those services and maneuver the supports. I've also been a federal, worked as a disability advisor for the federal government. So I've been advocating for a long time. This is definitely a passion of mine. I have a 21-year-old. So the journey for me started 21 years ago when I had a son that has autism. So there's a lot of information we're going to share today. So I'm super excited to be able to present this information for you. So if you guys have any questions along the way, as Allison said, put your questions in the chat, and she's going to be manning the chat for us as well.
So I just have a quick question. So it sounds like you do more than just like advocate at schools and help with ARDS. So we're excited to learn about that. You're not just a special education advocate. You do a lot of other levels of planning and advocacy as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the biggest things that I do as I sit down with families and I put together a strategic plan. So let's make sure that we're mirroring supports outside of school, inside of school, and connecting those resources and making sure you have a plan with accountability. And that's the biggest thing. A lot of families, they don't want to move to the next step because it's too overwhelming. So, so simply put, why do you need an advocate? Because you don't know what you don't know. And the biggest thing is it's scary, it's fearful. My specialty is I love working with families that have got initial diagnosis because they're like, what do I do now? Because I remember being in that phase and it's definitely a journey. And so helping you connect with those resources and making sure you know where you're going on the journey. So simply put, you don't know what you don't know. The biggest thing is if you were going to coach a major basketball team or a football team, you need to have a playbook. You need to have the right team. You need to already review the records and the plays of the players. It's the same thing when we're advocating for our child. So hiring a special education advocate, it empowers parents to navigate the complexities of the school system and making sure that you're effectively advocating for your child. Because if you don't know the rules, you're going to walk into doors, you're going to walk into rooms, and you will feel like a deer in headlights, like you have no idea. Special education in the school system, there's 1,000 acronyms. It's like alphabet soup. So you're walking in, you're in that area, and it causes anxiety. So you can go on to the next slide.
And one of the things, Tenika, that we've seen is like, you know, you can be in all these Facebook groups or other groups, special moms groups, special dads groups, whatever. And they're always talking about the ART and the 504 and the IEP meetings and these notices. And there's all these timelines and things like that. And what I would say is, hey, I'm pretty sharp on these things. And it's a lot. It is a lot. All those different deadlines and things you have to do and notifications and the timelines that the school has to reply. I mean, it's a lot to keep straight. So I am a fan. You know, one thing that I think when it comes to these, you know, IEPs, 504s, or intervention, or a special education advocate, and like you, I have 4 kids and 2 with disabilities that have kind of crossed that bridge into adulthood. And what I know, I think we learn things along the way, all of us, right? And that what I know is getting those interventions early is super, super important. You know, and I always say you're never too late. Okay, so don't beat yourself up if you're, you know, late to the party or your child is super behind. But getting those you know, those interventions, those supports, those accommodations early in your child's education journey is super important for success in the future. And I can just say that for sure. Did you experience that with your son as well?
Oh, absolutely. It was really like kick it indoors. I mean, and that's what we have to do as parents because they only give you your rights through these a stack of safeguards, and you're like, I don't know parents that read those safeguards because it's overwhelming. You start turning pages and you're like, what do I do? This is too much information. And so it causes a level of anxiety, which causes paralysis in families because if you don't know what to do, it's very difficult. And so those interventions are very, very important. So it's the biggest thing is we definitely, as advocates, we definitely help to cross that bridge. One of the biggest things that I do is I collaborate with a lot of other providers with school. It's advocacy always sounds like adversarial, and it doesn't, because we're definitely allies here to make sure that we're collaborating and we're understanding the benefits of our child that has that special needs. And we are responsible as parents to communicate what our child's needs are, but it's hard to communicate that if you don't know what their rights are as you're advocating. So one of the biggest things that I do, I get a lot of families that are just transitioning into special education for the first time because their child is newly diagnosed, or they've been in an ABA setting in full-time care and they have no idea and they're very overwhelmed about transitioning back into the school system. And so one of the biggest things that I do is I have pre-planning meetings. I'm not just throwing families in ARD meetings. I'm like, hey, let's have a meeting with the school. Let's sit down with some of the coordinators to see how we can get prepared to intercept your child in the special education system. So you kind of know your options before you get there and you're not just you're just diving into these ARD meetings because they are intimidating. And in a lot of ARD meetings, as parents, we walk in, we're overwhelmed. And so when you have a special education advocate, the parents gain the knowledge of having that ally with them, because who can help them provide those secure resources and support what their child desires, because there's no cookie cutter. All of our kids are very individualized. So what that IEP is, it's definitely individualized. So there's not one plan that fits every kid's needs. And so you mentioned something, Allison, about being in these Facebook groups, and I get so overwhelmed when I jump in and out of them because there's a lot of bad information that go in and out of those groups. And so the biggest thing is making sure that you feel like you have the right information to make the right informed decisions about your child's needs and what's most important in their care, because you have to make sure you have that line of communication. That's the biggest part.
One thing that I think about in hiring an advocate that I think that is important is, there's kind of this age-old thing of like, don't mess with our kids or our money and nobody gets hurt. And so we are the number one advocates for our children, but we are also the most invested and easily upset by things that maybe don't go our way, or where we might think our children are being wronged, right? And so the benefit of having an advocate is to keep it from becoming adversarial, whereas a parent can kind of get upset about things that are being said. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not, whatever. But that advocate's going to come in and really help keep it center, because the goal at the end of the day is for the betterment of the child and their learning and their educational goals and all of those things. And sometimes I've seen and heard things where things have gone south and adversarial and things like that. And I actually come from a long line of educators, retired educators, and what I know is that they are overworked and underpaid and understaffed, and sometimes, honestly, a lot of them, and it's not because they're not smart, they're brilliant, but they may be ill-equipped on the special needs side of the house. And so there's so many moving factors, and so oftentimes people are thinking it's the school, it's the administration, it's the teacher, it's some of these things, but that's why it's so important. It's the team. And bringing the right people to the table and to the team to work non-adversarial with the team to get the goals met is the way I think about it. But I just know as a parent, it's real easy to get real upset real quick if you're not happy with, kind of what's coming out of the meeting. And that's where that advocate really comes into play.
And to add to that, if we make emotional decisions when we're in that place. I've had families that say, I just snatched my kid out of school. And I'm like, whoa, wait, we didn't try to put a plan in place. And then so we're trying to fix the pieces, but we have to make sure that we are holding them accountable, but we're also equipping them with the information that they need to support our children. And so all of that information you have on the outside, they're not the specialists on your child. You're the specialist on your child. They are educators. And so when we collaborate with them and we share that information, it definitely makes for a happy medium, because there's a lot of times you feel like you go in guns blazing. And there are situations where you may need to go in and feel with that same level of fire, but you have to go in there with the right direction. And so it's very important that you make sure that you're there to support your child, but you're also there because you don't want to be that parent that everybody has a bad taste in their mouth when they hear your name or when they see you. So what advocates are, we're definitely champions for the educational system, the justice system, and ensuring that no child is left behind due to their learning differences. One of the biggest misconceptions is we have a lot of individuals that are super sharp, but they have a lot of quirkiness and they need some little specialized, individualized attention. So they get in certain areas, they might be in what we call a resource class, which is general education with some additional supports. They may get in that class and they don't even have the tools to advocate for themselves. So if the teacher doesn't understand how they learn different, because we haven't presented them with enough information in those IEP planning meetings. It's very important because you don't want that kiddo that's sitting in the room and they're just not being called on. They're not going to raise their hand. They're not going to ask for questions. And then they slip through the cracks. And so that's one of the biggest things that we're definitely here to make sure that all of the way, there's so many different learning styles that our children have. And so we want to make sure that they have access to all the different styles of learning based on their learning differences. So what we do is we definitely, like I said, we bring in special education laws and regulation, but the expertise, the best journey that someone can walk you on is the journey that they've walked. And so helping families access services that they are mandated. The law is mandated for them to receive these services. And so a lot of times we hear schools say no to this, they say no to that. And it's not because they're not required to, they're just not equipped to, and we're not going to allow excuses. And so bringing that expertise, and I am a very out of the box thinker because we boxed our kiddos have been boxed in for so many years, and we have to find ways to think outside of the box to make sure that none of them slip through the cracks. So hiring a special education advocate definitely empowers parents to be effective and not just for the moment. So one of the biggest things that I do with families is I sit down and we develop a strategic master plan because you are the CEO of your child's life. So we act accordingly, the same way we do in business, and we have business plans to address every area of our business with goals and visions, identifying strengths and weaknesses. I spend a lot of time with families in that area to make sure that when they get in these meetings that they're just so overwhelmed about, they have a plan because we've already mapped some things out. There's questions and answers. There's information that families get when they're in ARD meetings that they've maybe only heard for the first time. And it's so overwhelming and it's so emotional. And what advocates help do is we help that bridge that gap to make sure that what needs to be done is getting done. I mean, I have a motto, never go into an ARD meeting alone. As a parent, I never went in ARD meetings alone. Even if you don't have an advocate, bring someone with you for emotional support. Because the thing about it is that it's a very difficult process to maneuver. And as a parent, you have the right to all of the people that make an impact on your child and your child's services and supports, you can invite them to our meetings. So, and one of the other things, advocates are definitely dedicated to promoting inclusion and diversity in education and creating a more acceptable and supportive learning environment. I will just say this, the most impactful thing that has happened through all of my journeys is the opportunities that my child has had to be very inclusive in different activities in school. And that's the biggest thing is all of our kids have a niche. They have that special interest and we have to discover that. And the way we discover those things, and we include them in things so that they can shine in some of those lights. And so it's very important that they're allowed to be involved in different activities. They're included in sports, they're included in clubs, they're included in band, those things that they really, really like with the proper supports. So that's why it's definitely important to make sure that we have that supported learning environment for them that's going to promote and foster inclusion. So we definitely serve as a voice for many because a lot of the families that we may be advocating for, their child doesn't have a voice. And as a parent, you are always your child's voice. And so it's very, very, very important to make sure during that advocacy and finding that right advocate, that ensuring that every child has a potential and recognized and it's being nurtured. And that's very specialized, like going in and making sure we've identified the strengths, we've identified the weaknesses, we've identified some of those barriers, and sharing that information with a team of people that are all included in that learning process and the support process for your child is very important. And that's definitely where it's very important to know that you have an advocate that understands and that's there to help you nurture different strategies for your child. So we definitely, as special education advocates, we help schools understand the unique strengths and needs to each child, leading to more effective teaching strategies. And like I said, every child learns different. And there's so many different unique ways that you can teach our individuals. And so it's very important that those strategies are carried out. That's why I said in the beginning, I do a master plan with those families. Understanding the strengths and weaknesses are very important to show how effective some of the strategies can be carried out. So it's all about planning. And that's the biggest thing. If you have a special education advocate, their biggest role for you is to help you plan, execute, and educate you along the way. So do we have any questions at this time? I know we've gone through a lot of information. There's a lot of information that I've shared, but are there any questions that anybody has? You can definitely drop your questions in the chat and we'll definitely address those. So by hiring an advocate, parents definitely gain access to a wealth of knowledge and expertise in navigating the special education system. One of the biggest things, I am very big on networking, partnering, and collaborating. So I provide opportunities for families to get connected with, if there's a certain specialty that you need, certain therapists that you need with that case management background, it gives me the opportunity to help collaborate and coordinate those resources. I have networking events. I do coffee chats with families. So my biggest thing is the things that I needed as a special education parent, as a mom with a son with autism, I try to be the me that I needed for me when I walked the journey for my child.
We have a couple of things in the chat box. How do we get started with the process of hiring an advocate is the first one.
So how my process works is on my website, I do an intake form. So my process is a little bit unique from other advocates because I provide a family support plan. And that's definitely because you may need me in an ARD meeting today, but next month you might need me to sit down with you and do some resource coordination or to help you map out some different things that's going on and to develop access to some of those long-term supports, like making sure you get in touch with Allison to get started with some of those planning procedures. So I do an intake process on my website at Got Advocacy. You can fill out an intake form. I provide everybody a complimentary call so we can sit down to make sure that I'm a great fit. And that's the biggest thing. You don't want to hire an advocate without making sure that that advocate is definitely, it's just like when you're shopping. I'm shopped all the time, which I mean, these services are services that you need somebody to make sure that they're equipped. And so, like I said, I do a complimentary call with everybody. And in that call, I identify all the supports that you need really quick, and talk about what's the best plan. So I do have a couple of different plans, but I do meet families where they are as well, because advocacy services are all private paid. So the insurance companies, they don't really pay for these services. And it's very specialized. So we definitely meet you where you are.
The next question is there like support or accommodations for electives? This person says, my son was in band in middle school, but he decided to get out in high school because of the pressure. So can accommodations or provisions be extended to some of those electives or sports or what have you?
Yes. So when you're in the ARD meeting and you're talking about accommodations and you're talking about those supports, accommodations, I mean, we're going to talk about accommodations that might just be needed for English language arts, or accommodations that might just be needed for math. So you can have accommodations in various settings. So if he needs specialized attention in different areas, like short breaks, or if you might be needing additional support in that area, those accommodations can be added to the ARD in an ARD meeting to the plan, and it can go from different settings. So in making sure you're communicating that. So what I would recommend is definitely, if you have a child that's has an IEP, that you can ask to have a band teacher or a band someone that supports the band class to be in the ARD meeting, because that's part of the team. So making sure that you're hearing someone knows that these are some of the different things that my child needs that might support them in band. It may look different from English, language arts, math, and PE. So the electives can definitely have those accommodations, can be transitioned, supported in those areas as well.
Thank you. That was a great answer and great questions, guys. Thanks for putting those in the chat box.
Absolutely. So yes, as advocates, we are definitely committed to breaking down barriers and stereotypes, and fostering a culture of acceptance and understanding. And this is very important because we have had situations where kiddos have been, we know they're not placed in the right setting. They have been placed without the right supports. They have been placed without the right services. And as a result, there may have been some behaviors that arise. And during that, we definitely need to make sure that we're there and we're committed to making sure that that child doesn't get stereotyped, because they are always going to act out when that's not true. If they have the right supports and services, we can help them with self-regulation and things like that. So it's very important to understand and make sure our kids are accepted and they're understood. So with special education advocates, parents have a dedicated partner in the pursuit of their child's educational success. I'm really big on that because, like I said, I sit down with you and I have a master plan that we hash out. And in that master plan, we actually have a plan of action. Who's responsible? How do we access these things? What are the deadlines? Because a lot of times parents don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They don't know when to do it, and they don't know why they should be doing it. And so it's very important, especially when we're talking about transition. It's very important that we understand that we are partnering with someone that can help us make sure, and they have that level of expertise to help us achieve that educational success that we need for our children.
One of the things that I wanted to mention, like on that kind of the transition, we know, in Texas, the kids can stay in the public school, post age 18. There's various transition programs and 18 plus programs. Maybe they're staying in high school until 21 or 22, whatever that age may be. But what I've seen over the years, and I'm not a special education advocate and I don't play one on TV, but what I've seen over the years is those conversations really do need to start early. If it's truly your heart of heart or your intention that your child is going to stay in the public school post age 18, you need to start having those conversations and communications early, not waiting until they're, 17 and a half or 18 and they've already turned 18 and it's their senior year. And thinking about that, and one of the things from a financial perspective that I would like to say about that is when we have a loved one with a disability that has care needs the rest of their life, guys, we have a whole lifetime of paying for things for them. And if your children are in the public school, and a lot of our kids, not everybody's, but a lot of our kids are immature for their years, right? They're maybe behind maturity level 2 to 4 years, sometimes more, right? So I guess what I would say is, obviously we want the setting to be a right setting and things like that. But when you have a whole lifetime of care to pay for a loved one with with a disability, if their school setting is a good setting and they've kind of got good programs and things like that, there's no rush to rush them out at age 18, because those 2 or 3 more years in there is there's so much growth that happens during those years. So I just wanted to mention that because I've seen where people kind of waited until later and then they were getting some pushback because that wasn't what the school had in mind of what the plan might be. So do you have any thoughts on that, Tenika?
I definitely do. So, I mean, that's a very important topic, transition, because it's kind of like they brush over it so quickly, and it's not addressed in an area that is going to foster what that long-term care really looks like. So when we get to that transition stage, so that 18 to 22, that's a whole nother ball game. However, before your child gets to that 12th grade ARD meeting, it's very important that the 18 to 22 programs out there, they're big on partnerships and collaboration with Texas workforce. Maybe your child's not ready for work. A lot of them may not be, but what are the areas and what are those supports that Texas workforce can help provide that can help prepare your child to get there? And there's some collaborations that happen with schools, with Texas Workforce Commission, to provide some of that vocational rehabilitation and that vocational training. So it's very important. Even in some of those meetings, they're going to slide you a card and say, here's your, here's the transition vocational counselor that we're assigned to for Texas Workforce. But guys, those individuals can be invited to our meetings. They can be part of the planning. They can be in a meeting hearing your child's present levels and what their goals are and what are some of the things that they're working on, which then you have a whole nother layer of support that can help provide additional services that definitely are needed. And there's a whole list. I mean, that's a whole nother webinar to talk about the services that they offer to help get your kids equipped for transition. But it's very important. 18 to 22, because let me tell you, if you're not preparing for when the bus stops coming to picking up your child, it's going to be a big impact. It's going to be a big impact. And yes, they may not be ready for college. They may not be ready for another program. So that 18 to 22, they really shift gears. And we're looking at those functional life skills. We're looking at those soft skills that they need to help them get transition for long-term support and what those needs are. So the learning looks different in the 18 to 22 because they're really focused on that vocational piece. Like, what can we teach and learn different that can help us get to, I don't know, maybe getting a job or getting some other supports and putting some strategies in place. So transition is so big. It's not. And then, so we talk about those agencies where if you didn't get access, you didn't start earlier. So Texas Workforce is one of those agencies where there's no wait list. Your child can qualify for services while they're going through that 18 to 22 program. And they're not having to wait 20 years to get some of those services, during that time period. So it's definitely, transition is so important, and understanding and having a goal and having plans, because when 18 comes and you graduated and we're at senior year, 18 comes really fast, and then 21 comes really fast. And there's a lot that goes in that window from 18 to 21 to make sure that you are putting a lot of supports in place and that you're checking off boxes, that you've met with Allison's team to make sure that we're talking about long-term future planning. And it's never too late. So it's definitely important to get started. And a lot of times parents just don't know where to start. And so they didn't get started.
Sure. I think transition, when we think about transition, we think transitioning out of high school, but you're right. That is a loaded word. Like transitioning your doctors, you've lived under this cocoon of pediatrics, and
Yep.
this, everything is so smooth in pediatrics. It's not as smooth in adulthood, and losing some of these beloved doctors and specialists and things like that. So it is very broad. But one of the things that comes to mind for our students is, just like all people, your students, they need their tribe, their friend group, their purpose, their being, whatever it is that they're doing. Maybe they're working on themselves and building skills themselves. But what we've seen before is where a lot of these kids are advocating themselves to be done with school at 18 because they want to be out, but they're not ready. And then they come home and there is no plan, and they're at home and they're playing video games, and they don't have their team and their tribe and their friends and their purpose. And and it's kind of it's not good. It's not a good path forward. So there are private transition programs that you can certainly pay for. Okay, you can leave the public school at 18 and go to a private transition program, pay for that out of pocket. So there's a lot of different ways about it, but the long and the short of it is just think about that early. Where is your child? Meet them where they are. Are they 2 to 4 years behind in maturity? They may be 18. They may have an 18-year-old label, but are they functioning on a 13-year-old level? Maybe they're not ready for work. We do, higher education. We did a presentation yesterday for higher education for individuals with disabilities. There's all kinds of options out there, but sometimes our path doesn't look the same. Sometimes we delay this. Maybe it's vocational school or a license or a certificate. Maybe it's transition program and then a license or a certificate or the community college. Maybe they're 35 before they ever have the license or certificate, and it's not a race. But, all the Facebook groups and everything, when we're looking at all these other kids, it looks like a race. But I think the important thing is really just meeting them where they are.
Yes. And that's very important that you mentioned that, Allison, because really quick, I did an amazing tour yesterday, and I saw some kids that were in that transition phases, learning technical IT. Those guys that graduated to the couch, we want them off the couch. If they love playing video games, let's put them in an area where they can learn how to develop some video games or learn how to create some video games. But just finding what that unique area of support that's needed. And I saw that yesterday. I don't know if you have been to Non-Pirelli, but I went and visited them, and I was just like, this is an amazing thing that people have to see, that there's these opportunities. And when you talk about transition, it looks different, and you have to explore those things. And that's a lot of what I do in helping families, like finding that creativity. Like I play a very, very vital role in making sure that we're looking at what are some of their talents, what are their abilities, what are those things that make your child great, and how can we foster those? So that tour that I did yesterday was great. I was like, I saw guys that were getting Google certifications, IT certifications, Dell certification. I was just like, who would even know that they can do this in this setting where all their quirkiness or all their abilities and their talents are able to shine with the support levels that are needed. So it's very important to be creative when we're thinking about the roles that, like as advocates, like we're there to help you see the big picture. We're there to really help shine a light on some of these things, because it's very important to know that there's an area for your child to foster their learning, the way they learn different. But you need to have somebody that's an ally to help you to discover that.
Sure. Oh, I keep skipping slides here. Oh my goodness. Let me get your contact information up here. Always what comes up, Tenika, is like on an average, if somebody wanted to engage your service, can you give us a range? Like people like to plan financially, like, kind of a range of services or is cost-wise. Can you just give us something along those lines?
Absolutely. So like I said, I have a array of services that I provide. So I have services that start at $200 because I definitely want to meet families where they are. And so that's what that initial discovery call is like, let's sit down and see what you need and how we can help you to get there. And so, like I said, I definitely help meet families where they are. And so it's not out of reach. Some of the services that we pay for our children can be expensive. And I realized that. And like I said, I want it to be a me for me. So I make my services within reach for families so that they can get the support that they need. So I have a package that fits everyone's needs. Yes.
I love that. So on this QR code that we see on this screen that says scan me, will that take them to schedule a free consultation with you?
Yes, it
awesome.
will. That will take you to schedule that. And you can always go to my website. You can send me an email, follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm not hard to find.
I love that. So, one person asked about the recording and the slides. Everyone who has registered for today's meeting, the webinar is going to get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording. All of our recordings also live on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel, so past recordings are out there. We talked about some other topics. There's over 300 webinars out there on topics surrounding special needs planning, transitioning, you name it, it is out there. So you guys can check that out on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel as well. So one thing, I think about Tenika is that, it's the beginning of the school year. So this is a very timely webinar to be talking about advocating and kind of these, the accommodations that your student might need. And the thing is it's already September, and before you even know it, it's Thanksgiving break, it's Christmas break, and then they're talking about end of grade testing and all that kind of stuff. It's the spring. And so I would just say, yes, get going. I'm glad that you guys took the time to attend and be here with us today. On the transition on the financial side of the house, guys, we're nationally certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. So just like a lot of things change when your child turns 18, again, a lot of the financial things that they maybe didn't qualify for before all these years, they start qualifying for. So we help equip parents with the knowledge that they need to know to have the money in the right buckets to qualify for the state and federally funded programs when your child turns 18. We give a lot of guidance of how and when to apply, what to do, what not to do, how to have the money in the right buckets. Some of the things that we talk about when we think about transition, we think about, the long term of who will care for your child when you're gone or when you no longer can. We help families develop future care plans. So this is really going to answer some of those questions. And we've talked about this a lot, and we do have complete webinars for the vocational rehab program, the Texas Workforce Commission that Tenika was talking about. But what are some of the post-high school programs, educational programs, vocational programs, transition programs? They might be day programs. They might be day programs 3 days a week, and it gets your loved one out of the house. We also say consider, touring, transition, partial care, future residential care, intentional communities. Some of these waiting lists can be quite long. And so we always recommend get yourself on a waiting list so that way you have the right to say no, but you also have the right to say yes if you need to. When it comes to planning, we always tell families that we want you to make careful considerations before naming siblings as a future caregiver. This happens a lot when there is a lack of planning. And we always, express, just like you were when you were young, you had hopes and dreams. Maybe you were going to get married. Maybe you're going to have a child. Maybe you're going to have a house. Maybe you're going to have a career. The list goes on and on of hopes and dreams that people have. And the siblings of your loved one with a disability have those hopes and dreams as well. And so we like to see siblings as a loving member of the family, a member of their team, but not in that caregiver role, because we don't want it to be an obligatory relationship where there's resentment. So that's something that we think about a lot as well. We've talked about a lot of things and all of these topics: how to develop a comprehensive special needs care plan, future care cost estimates, how much money do we need to fund a special needs trust, Texas waivers, the Medicaid waivers and interest list, how to get on those lists, what's the details with those waivers, SSI, SSDI, understanding the differences and knowing when to apply. What is an ABLE account? Why do you need one? How much money can you put into an ABLE account? Will it be counted against them for SSI? We talk about special needs trust, guardianship. All of these topics are things that come up from time to time, and especially if we're in the kind of that zone of transitioning. These are things that we haven't had to think about a lot before, but they're definitely on the high priority list going forward. Guys, we do a lot of advocacy. We do a lot of webinars on a weekly basis. They're always from 12 to 1, and they always live on our YouTube channel after the fact. So when you guys get these slides today, and if you guys are listening to this on our podcast, you can email us at contact@cpgcares.net, and we'll be happy to send you a copy of these slides as well. But you'll have a link to all of our upcoming webinars that you can register for as well. We work on a collaborative team here at Consolidated Planning Group, so it's not just me. I always say we have an awesome team that we work with, and I always like to put some faces with their names. As you may, when you schedule your free consultation, you may meet with other members of the team, including myself. We always offer free consultations. You can open your camera app on your phone and just hover over the QR code. It'll take us to a calendar link where you can book a free personalized consultation with us and kind of bring some of your questions that you have to the table. We'll be happy to answer those questions. And during that meeting, we'll talk to you further about the doors that you can walk through with Consolidated Planning Group, a little bit about how we work. We're never here to rain on any great relationships that you already have in place. Most of the people that come to us already have relationships in place, but they're, the relationships that they have in place are not nuanced and special needs, and so that's why they come to us. So we're happy to work with you and kind of meet where you are. We have some people that come to us that have done extensive planning and they want a second opinion. We have other people that are kind of middle of the road. They got started, they put it on the shelf, and they need to pick up where they left off. And we have other people that are starting at the beginning. No matter where you are, it's not about looking back. It's about looking forward and making sure that you have everything, everything set up properly, money in the right buckets, and things set up for the future. We don't want people to wait until the crisis happens, until somebody has a stroke or a heart attack or a parent passes away or becomes incapacitated. So we always say, while you're of sound mind and body, and some of us can question, are we still sound mind and body? Depends on what day we ask, right? But it's the time to kind of have these conversations and kind of work through some of these things. So it has certainly been my pleasure partnering with you, Tenika, and we look forward to partnering with you again soon. And I hope you guys will reach out to Tenika and find out more about her various programs and the doors that you can walk through with her, with Got Advocacy. And we look forward to connecting with you again on our next webinar. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.